All right, welcome to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. Today we have Mark Kenyon back. He's been on a few times, and we caught him in between hunts, actually here in Michigan, it looks like, to spend some time telling us a hunting story. So obviously I started and gave away your name, but Mark, you want to tell everybody what you do and kind of who you are?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate that. So my gig is, I guess, multifaceted, but mostly I talk, write, and film stuff about whitetail deer. I run the Wired Hunt podcast. I'm one of our whitetail guys over at Meat Eater, writing for our Wired to Hunt page within the Meat Eater network, and I host all of our whitetail shows. So I've hosted a show called The Back 40. We did one called 1 Week in November. And then my most recent show came out this late summer, early fall, called Deer Country. And that's all over on the Meat Eater YouTube channel. And some of those over on Sportsman's channel too. So that's my main gig. And then I also am an author, wrote a book. I think we talked about that last time, maybe. That Wild Country, about public lands and outdoor adventure and whatnot. So that's what I do. That's what I've done, and I love being outside, love hunting, fishing, doing all that kind of fun stuff.
The series I think you just released your last episode.
Yeah,
and that was awesome. That was so fun to see the different types and styles of hunts. I love the still hunting stuff, the Northeast, and some of the glassing in the West, and even the Buffalo County stuff. That was so fun to follow.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, it was a heck of a season. I mean, it was a very, very, very challenging year. A lot of stuff went wrong. So it was kind of a bummer that the show documented my lowest point as a hunter, maybe. But a lot of great challenges. Went, as you said, to a lot of different places all across the country and spent a day learning from a regional expert, and then spent the next 3 days trying to take what I learned and duplicate it myself in this brand new place, hunting in a brand new way. So I had to really stretch outside of my comfort zone, try a lot of new things. And, I didn't have a ton of traditional quote unquote success, but I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And I can feel it. Like this year, even though the season's still young, I have a different confidence level. I have a different something, because I kind of went through hell and got back to the other side, I feel like, and I learned so much along the way. So it was good. It was good for me.
All the different styles of hunting, kind of like you're alluding to, it creates like a holistic approach to hunting. So if you know all the ways to do it, when you go out in the woods, you can kind of adjust and kind of stay mobile and, flexible, right?
Yeah. It's given me, for years and years, just doing the Wired Hunt podcast, I'm sure you've experienced this too, talking to so many people from different parts of the country with different styles. You learn a lot, of course, through that. And I thought I had this, wide breadth of knowledge because of that. And I've hunted a lot of different places too in the previous years, but doing this, where I went to really the real extremes, like I hunted extremely different places in extremely different ways. And I wasn't just hearing these people talk about it. I was spending, 24 hours with them, walking in their footsteps, seeing exactly what they do and exactly how they do it, and asking them exactly why. I mean, the learning kind of quotient there was just ramped up to a whole nother level. And then getting to spend a few days in that place to really then take what you learned and try to put it into action. Man, it was the best possible learning opportunity to then give you this vast kind of, I feel like I've got this big freaking toolbox now that I never had before, that any situation I encounter now, I think I can just flip open that toolbox and be like, okay, yeah, this is the right tool for this job, or this is the right tool. And I'm already seeing ways that I'm mixing and matching these different ideas to help me now, that maybe I wouldn't have done in the past.
No, I love it. It's been fun to follow, and like even watching, you get to learn a lot. I mean, to see like a guy like Hal Blood on the screen and just follow his thought process is cool. And I'm sure you gleaned a lot just by being around him.
What's up? We are going to thank a few of these sponsors that help make this beautiful show a reality for all of you. So here we go. So a big reason, I would say, to why we're so successful and we have so many bucks on the wall is because we use HuntWise. HuntWise is a GPS mapping app that you can download on any phone, any platform. You can look up public land huntings, ORV trails. You can get the weather. They actually have a HuntCast 2.0 that they teamed up with Jeff Sturgis to make. It's awesome. You need to check this thing out. Go to HuntWise, download the app.
I feel like if you go into the woods without optics, it's like going into the woods without pants on. Would you agree with that?
To a point.
To a point. We are huge fans of running binoculars, spotting scopes, and different things when we hunt, even whitetail. I bring binoculars out every time I go. We choose Vortex Optics because they make the best glass in the business. They have an amazing warranty, super clear glass, super helpful people that work there.
Also, if you want to rep some sweet Vortex swag like this warm shirt on a nice fall day, head over to Vortex Wear. Thank you. And use the promo code TFC20 for 20% off your purchase. Saddle game, you need to be in it. If you haven't been in it yet, then you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah.
Trophy Line Tree Sales makes some of the best saddles in the industry. They have 3 different platforms that we use and that are awesome.
I want to make a quick plug for the Wingman with a couple steps. You can take one less step, stick, and it's like a combination of a stick and a platform. I've been exclusively hunting out of it this year, and my mobile setup is so sweet. I'm very proud of it.
Awesome.
I highly recommend the Wingman system.
If you're ready to pull the trigger on that and you want to get with James and do the Wingman, head over to the website and you can save yourself 10% on the purchase. TFC 10 will get you that. I like to think I single-handedly got James to switch to compound again, but I'd probably be a liar and everyone would call me out on that. We shoot prime bows. We think they're awesome. Great accuracy, super shootable.
Made here in Michigan.
Made in Michigan, so we love that. It's hard to complain.
That's where Jared was made. So
surprisingly,
we like that. Yeah.
You're welcome. So go check out these prime bows.
We are of a firm belief that the arrow is the lifeblood of the archery industry. We've said it 1,000 times. But in all seriousness, we are huge fans of arrows that are durable, that fly well, and that kind of make up for some of my inaccuracies in the way that I shoot. So we shoot Vector custom arrows.
The hammer.
The hammer.
That's Thor.
They are made in Wisconsin by our buddy Isaac. Great arrows. And if you want to go and get yourself some, have a little bit of a discount, use TFC10 for 10% off. Or call Isaac up and tell him we sent you.
Mm-hmm. You want his phone number? Comment below.
Yep, comment below.
Mark, you are a Michigan guy, which means, and so I'm guessing I know the answer to this question, but one of the questions we ask our guests as part of this kind of hunting story series is your favorite hunt. So if you had to think of one hunt you'd be doing in a year where you look forward to it, it could be deer camp with your family, it could be out west trip, it could be whatever you do. Like what's your favorite hunt that you look forward to every year?
Yeah, I gotta. If I could only have one, I'd have to pick, the family deer camp up in northern Michigan. Whitetail is my favorite critter, and my favorite place in the world to be when it comes to deer is that deer camp. But not because of the deer, which is interesting. I mean, we don't see very many deer up there. I haven't killed a deer at our deer camp in, I don't know, 10, 12 years, 12, 13. I don't know, it's been a while. There's not a whole lot of opportunities up there, but it's the place. It's the place and the people. Being up there with my dad, now taking my son up there, my uncles, friends. That place is kind of what made me who I am. I've been going up there since I was 2 or 3, and I learned to shoot, I learned to hunt, I learned to fish, I learned to do all of it there. So that's the place. That's the place where I think some of my ashes will have to be scattered someday. And hopefully get to spend some more good deer camps up there in the future. So that'd be, if I had to pick one, if I was allowed 2, which I know wasn't allowed in the question, but I'll just tack it on there. I do love seeing deer. So I'd love to have a second whitetail hunt where I'm in some like awesome Midwestern spot where I'm going to see a lot of deer, see a lot of running action, and just get to enjoy the show too.
Spoken like a true whitetail man.
Yes.
All right. So we'll jump into your hunting story, and I'll kind of explain that in a minute.
Sure.
But before we do, so we do questions of the month. Last month was mostly useless piece of gear that you bring in your pack. We've kind of recycled that question a bit. This month is a debate that we hear a lot of, because I do quite a bit of hunting with just like solid clothes, and shot a turkey with it this year. Got a lot of messages like, oh, we'd never shoot a turkey where I'm from with solids, or you're never going to shoot. Actually a good one is last week I was coming back from Kentucky,
had a buck coming in here in Michigan that I had on camera. I mean, I was hunting in a undefined location, and
as they all are.
As they all are, and it was close to the road. And I found a lot of success lately in places near the road that people overlook. So anyways, I see this buck running across the road, coming right at me. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is exciting. I'm getting ready, and I got my bow. I got a wrist release, and I've never done this before, but I bumped the trigger right as I have it like this. So it does the dunk, and it just, the arrow just goes like a foot, right? And it just hits every branch on the way down from the tree. Ugh. Right. So, but what had happened with that video, a lot of people are like, well, why didn't you knock your arrow and whatever, which it was knocked for everybody. But the other question, for some reason, it went like viral, was everybody thought I had a blue shirt on. And so comments coming in about it was gray, but it looked blue because whatever. Right.
What an idiot wearing blue.
Yeah, that's all so much. I'm like, yeah, I know that. So, but the thing is,
I love the internet trolls.
Oh, and it was on TikTok, which we're kind of just dipping our toes into TikTok. Haven't done a lot of it there. I don't do enough dancing videos to be very popular on it. But it was funny because everybody's like, well, you need to wear camo. And so that kind of got this debate started. And so we've been asking our guests, like, are you, is camo necessary? Are you a camo guy, or are the solids, the earth tones good enough? What's your take on this debate?
So if there's anything I've learned as a deer hunter in the last 15 years, since I've gotten really, really dead serious about it, and since I've been able to talk to all these different people, there's one thing that is absolutely true. And that is that there are no absolutes when it comes to deer hunting. There's no black or white. There's no this way or no way. There's a whole lot of deer hunters who like to say that. There's a whole lot of folks I know who say, oh, this is the way you got to do it. And if you don't do that, you're an idiot. There's a lot of folks like that. And none of it's true. So there's a million examples of this kind of thing, but I think camo versus solid is a great example. Do you need camo to kill a deer? No, obviously not. Tons of people kill deer wearing blue jeans or Carhartts or khakis or whatever solid stuff from whatever camo company or apparel company you like. No, you don't need it. Absolutely not. Can it help you? And can it help you in certain situations more than others? Yes. So it's a choice, right? Just like, do you want to practice scent control or not? Can you always get it all the time right? No, not all the time. Are you going to get busted sometimes? Yep. But can trying to do some kind of scent control help you sometimes? Yeah. So I look at camo the same way I look at scent control. There are a ton of variables in the whitetail woods that I can't control. I can't control what the wind's going to do. I can't control what that deer's thinking that morning. I can't control what the does are going to do. I can't control the sun, the moon, the stars. I can't control any of it. But I can control a few things as a hunter. And those variables that I do have control over, in my opinion, I need to take as much care as I can to put those in my favor, because 97% of it is out of my hands.
Right.
So I look at camo as one of those things that I can tweak that in my favor. So maybe in a given hunting season, maybe there's only going to be 10 encounters all season, maybe, where a deer happens to look up in my direction, and I would be spotted in that case. If I'm wearing solids, maybe that's a situation where I blob up and there's this big outline up there. If I was wearing camo, maybe that would break up my outline. I get away with it. And that happens 10 out of 100 encounters, maybe. If I have something that's going to help me in those 10 out of 100 encounters, it's worth it for me.
Right.
Because those 10 encounters, one of them might be very important. That might be the one chance I get all season at a buck, where that one time that buck's rolling through and it's the doe who happens to look up because I moved or something. And if I'm wearing a camo pattern that breaks up my pattern enough, maybe that doe looks up, says, huh, that was weird, and then gets over and continues on, and then the buck rolls in, a minute later. I don't know what it is. But I don't think you need them. I don't think you need camo all the time. I think in certain situations it's, overkill. But there's enough times when I think it is super helpful that I'm going to wear it 99% of the time.
I like that approach. I've heard you say this before, where it's like, you have basically a percentage, you put it in percentages. So like, you have X percentage likelihood to be successful, and any chance you can up that percentage point 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how you generally become more or less successful at deer hunting, because it's like tiny incremental. I'm a big Michigan State fan,
And our football coach, Mel Tucker, is always talking about like incremental wins. Like you win a game, not with like one big thing you do right. It's like this little inch win and this little inch win. It's this little thing. You keep stacking all these little tiny things you do. And if you stack enough tiny things the right way, and if you do it consistently enough, that's how you win consistently. And I think that's true in football, and I think that's true in deer hunting.
Love it. Yeah, I expected a thoughtful answer, and you lived up to the hype. So thanks for that. All right,
I do my best.
So we're in this stories series and having guys come on that I'll say, basically it's when you think of a great hunting story, what comes to mind that you've been a part of. So we've had guys come on and talk about a very successful hunt. Our first one, which is actually releasing the day that we're recording this, is a Dall sheep hunt. Somebody went out, a friend of ours, and this hunt of a lifetime, and it just turned out to be this incredible hunt, incredible adventure. Others talk about not being successful and learning a whole lot. Others are describe what might sound like more of a run of the mill just hunt, but that meant something really big to them, something really important. So Mark Kenyon, when you think of a great hunting story that you've lived, what comes to mind?
It's really tough because there's so many great experiences and many different experiences for many different reasons. There's the, as you just described, right? There's like the hunting story where you kill the big buck. There's the hunting story where you screw everything up and you learn something from it. There's the hunting stories with a loved one that meant a lot. There's the funny stories. Man, I'm having a hard time picking. I've got one that's like funny and the big buck. Golly, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna pick one. All right. Here's a story that kind of combines a little bit of family, a little bit of fun, and a big deer. And hopefully there's new listeners, because the one thing is, like, if anybody listens to my stuff, they've heard these stories.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's folks who this isn't old news for. But do you want a long story or short story? Did you say 30 minutes about is what I'm allowed?
Whatever feels right. Go with your gut.
All right. So this was, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. And I am hunting some stuff in Michigan that's in the neighborhood, in the general neck of the woods of where I live. So I can scout a lot from afar. I can get up on hills. I can leave home and be pretty quickly up on a hill and glassing down this area. And I can see deer. I can kind of pattern deer this way. Friends or family are in the area. They know these areas that I hunt, and they'll like drive down the road and they'll see a deer and they'll be like, oh man, I saw that buck you're after. Like that kind of thing happens. So I had just taken this job with Meat Eater. I'd merged Wired to Hunt into Meat Eater. I don't know, this is back in 2017 or 18. And I was told that I needed to be in Montana to meet with Steve and all these people that work at Meat Eater on Halloween, I think it was. It was like the 30th and the 31st. You got to be there for this big planning meeting. And I'm thinking, like, are you kidding me? Like, this is like the beginning of the best part of the season. Like, I've never missed a day hunting, Halloween in like 15 years or something. I got to be out there. And I can't. I got to be there for this meeting. So I'm in Montana, and I get a text message on my phone from my wife. And she had been, doing what I just said. She'd been going through the area, and she saw antlers back in this area that I could hunt. She stopped and she, got a little film of it and sent it to me. And it is the biggest buck I've ever seen in Michigan in my life. Walking right past like where one of my tree stands is. I mean, a monster buck. I mean, like, shouldn't be in Michigan kind of buck.
Right.
And I just lost it. I'm sitting there in a meeting with Steve, and I stopped talking to him. I'm looking at my phone like, holy shit, man, you got to look at this. This is right where I hunt. And so this buck captured my imagination, captured my obsession. I was able to get back there like 2 or 3 days later. And we started calling this deer Frank. We tag names on these bucks because I see them so often. I talk about these deer so often. It just becomes a lot more convenient to have a name for these deer, so I can talk about without having to say, oh, that one really big 10-pointer that had short D-force on the left side and like an 18-inch spread. yada, yada, yada. So we call this deer Frank because my wife saw this buck on Halloween, kind of like Frankenstein. He's a monster.
Okay, I like it.
So that's where the name Frank came from. So I'm back like November 3rd or 4th, start hunting him. And, you know, it's some of the details here are a little bit fuzzy, but I remember the first time I ever saw him, I moved in with a saddle, kind of in this general, right in the edge of this bedding area that I was thinking he was coming in and out of. And I set up and I see this doe come out that last like hour of daylight. She pops out of the bedding area, head into a little green food source, and like right behind her, I just see this wall of tines come out of the brush. And this is the first time I personally got to see this deer that year. I eventually came to realize that I'd seen this deer once the previous season, once that summer previous, and then I had gotten pictures of him one day and found his shed the 2 years previous to that. So I ended up having a little bit of history with him, but these like such like blips on the radar that I never like thought this is a deer I could hunt. And now all of a sudden here he is. And it was just like jaw dropping. He looked like 175 inch, 180 inch type buck in Michigan. And I never experienced anything like that. It just didn't even seem real. And ends up that buck follows the doe out into this little food source and ends up breeding her right in front of me, like 80 something, I don't know, 80, 90 yards, something like that, right out there in the open, breeding this doe, just monster buck breeding this doe. I felt like I was living in like a Drury Outdoors film or something.
Right.
Truly was like one of these out of body experiences where I just couldn't process that this was actually happening. But it was. And, you know, we got to, I'm trying to remember if this was the next day, but so I saw this happen. Maybe this is how it went. So I saw this happen, and he'd gone to this little food source where I had a blind. And forgive me, I got to plug in my phone here, so give me 5 seconds to do a little editing, but my phone's gonna die on me.
No worries.
All right, amateur move, but
it's great.
right, so he was breeding this doe out in this little grain food source, little food plot I had planted out there, and I had a hay bale blind out in the edge of that plot on the other side. So he was like breeding this doe like 10 yards in front of that blind, right where if I had been there, I would have got a shot of him. So the next day, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going back into that spot. And what I'd seen happen was that I'd seen him breed the doe, push her into this like tall, grassy swale, like, I don't know, maybe like a 3-acre just pothole with really tall grasses. And he pushed her in there and they just stayed in that. And historically, I'd seen this kind of thing happen. And lots of times they will just stay in there. Like a buck will lock down the doe and he'll keep her holed up in this grassy spot. So my hope was I wouldn't be surprised if they are still in here tomorrow morning, and they might transition back into the main bedding area later in the day. So I thought if I could somehow get back into this spot and be right along that creek edge where that blind was, as a creek, and then the blind and then this food plot. And I thought if I could somehow get around them and get into there, I bet you I'd get that a shot of. So I snuck way out and around, took a long back way to get out of there that day. Next morning, I came back in, went all the way to the far south part of the property, circled way to the back, and then came back in, and, did a huge J-hook in to get to that spot, got in the blind. And I'm sitting there in the blind, and daylight breaks. And do many kids listen to this show?
No, I don't know. No.
Well, I'll keep it relatively PG, because I'm in this blind, and all of a sudden I see the buck. And he's maybe like 90 yards away coming back my way. And I say, holy shit, this is actually going to work. He's going to roll back through here. And just as I see this buck, and just as I realize he's actually going to come my way, I get that feeling in my stomach, like where your stomach starts cramping, and gurgling, making all sorts of weird noises. And I realized, oh my God, I have to shit. And so this buck slowly working his way towards me, as I am realizing increasingly by the second, I have to go to the bathroom. This is going to happen soon. And then I'm talking to myself, hold together, Mark, hold together. This buck becomes the biggest buck of your life. You are not going to shit your pants right now. And the buck's getting closer. And I'm saying, Mark, you got to do this. And then I'm realizing increasingly, like it's been like a minute, I'm realizing, okay, this is happening. You're not stopping this. This is actually going to happen. The buck's at 70 yards now, closing distance, heading my way. And I realized that I can't get out of my blind, obviously, and take a shit out there,
right,
because there's a booner heading towards me. And so I realized the only option I have right now is to somehow, while the buck is approaching me, stay beneath window level in my hay bale blind, pull off all my clothes, dig a hole in the bottom of my blind, and drop a deuce as the buck approaches in range. And in the most, I mean, if someone could have seen this, pure panic and disarray beneath the windows of the blind, but very cool,
squatting,
cool as a cucumber above the blind. I managed to do all of that, drop a deuce in the hole, cover back up with dirt, grab my bow, and get in position for what I'm hoping will be this buck coming through. And I managed to pull it off, but the buck doesn't come into range. The buck stays out of range, stays on the edge of this timber, doesn't come. I think I tried to grunt or something, nothing works. He continues on his way. So that is that encounter. Next day, I remember I went back in.
Just to interrupt, that's like blood, sweat, tears, and poop for this buck.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Blood, sweat, tears, and poop. Absolutely. Yeah. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever done. Pure panic and insanity. And almost worked.
Yeah.
Next day I went in, I thought, okay, he transitioned back along the timber edge this time. I'm going to try hunting in the timber edge. Was it that night?
And that's where you started. Is that where you saw him the first? So you went back to your first spot again. Okay.
Yeah. I didn't end up going to the exact same place. I moved farther down the edge. The point being here is I bumped over to the tree line again, and then he came back through in the food plot again. And so that happened. I think I had 3 encounters there where I saw him and he was always the place I was before.
Unreal.
So then I decided, like, I stuck in one spot for another day or two and he didn't show up. So I'd seen him, I think, like 3 or 4 times. And this was like that, November 4th through the 10th-ish window. I had 4 encounters with him, if I remember correctly. And the closest I had him was like 65 yards, something like that. Giant deer, incredible sightings every time. Really, really awesome. Another time, there was a 4th time when I kind of cut the middle distance. He kept transitioning back and forth, sometimes with the doe, sometimes on his own. And I kept on making little adjustments and just couldn't quite get it right. And it gets to be that, November 10th to the 15th time period. I'm realizing, okay, this is, last chance I'm gonna get at him before the gun season. And then he's, gonna get killed by someone for sure.
Yeah.
So, I was out there every day trying hard and just nothing worked. He disappeared. So gun season arrives. I think, it's game over. He probably got killed somewhere. I don't get pictures of him. I don't see him. I continue hunting through November. Get to the end of November. It's like the last day of gun season, somewhere in that ballpark. I finally get a picture of him. He survived. So now it's December. And in my neck of the woods, we have muzzleloader season. But because we're in an area that's adjacent to CWD, that muzzleloader season had been shifted to an any firearm season. That's any legal firearm.
Right.
So it's muzzleloader season opened on, I don't know what day it opened, the December 9th or 10th or something like that. And when that season opened, I thought, okay, I got this picture of Frank, post regular gun season, so he's still alive. I'm going to just start trying to keep glassing this area and keep checking cameras and keep glassing and try to figure out when he's back in the area, because it seemed like, as I mentioned, the first year I just got one picture of him and I found his shed. The second year, I saw him in the summer down the road. I saw him one time and then no pictures. And now this year he seemingly showed up, was there for like a week, 10 days during the rut, disappeared. And then I got this November picture. And then I got this I think I got like one November picture. And then like a week or 10 days later, I got another picture. This is early December. So the point of me mentioning that is that I'm realizing that this buck obviously does not live on my farm, like this area that I have access to.
Right.
He's somewhere else, but he seems to be circling through every once in a while. So if I can keep tabs in the area and if I can somehow get eyes on him or get a recent picture of him that tells me he's here now, then I'm gonna strike hard and fast and get right into this best bedding area that he seemed to be visiting a lot, and take, hopefully, somehow get lucky, maybe with a muzzleloader, or in this case, a gun. So I don't remember what the date was, but on one of these days I went and was glassing from this hillside. I could glass down on this bottom, and I'm in there in the morning, and lo and behold, I see a big bodied deer approach this 2-year-old buck, and then the big bodied deer steps out into the open so I can finally see him. And I realized, oh, holy crap, that's him. He's here. He starts sparring with this other buck I called Tran.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
so they're like sparring. I'm realizing this buck's here, but I don't have anything to hunt. I'm just glassing. And I don't know how I really would have made a move anyways if I had my gun. But eventually Frank picks up a doe and starts bumping her and is like right on her tail, and then like slowly walks her right past that hay bale blind, right past that little food plot, right back into that back bedding area. And I see this all happen. And I see exactly how they go in. I see exactly, you know, where I think they're going to bed for the day. And I realize like, this is my chance. This is it. Mm-hmm. You saw what he did. It's December, you know, it's first week or two of December, seemingly like some second rut kind of stuff going on.
Sure.
It seemed like this must have been like a fawn that's coming to heat a month later, and he's locked on her right now. So my theory was like, he's going to be back this afternoon with that doe. He's not leaving that doe. And that doe is going to come back out to this little food plot to feed a little bit, and he's going to be right behind her. I have to be in there. Problem was, my wind direction was blowing right into that bedding area. So I remember sitting there thinking, like, there's no way you can hunt this deer without him catching your wind. But then on the other side, it says, there's no way you're going to kill this deer unless you try to hunt it today, because this is like the day he's there. He might not be here tomorrow or for the rest of the season. You got to do it. And I remember thinking to myself, with a due west wind, you might be able to get away with the hay bale blind, because the hay bale blind's right in that creek.
Yep.
And if the wind actually stays true to straight west, it might suck right down that creek.
Right. Thermals bring it down.
Mm-hmm. And you could get lucky if that wind stays right along the creek. If the deer aren't crossing the creek and he was on one side of it, if he stays on the side they're on, they might transition just parallel to your wind, and you might be able to get away. It'd be like a big, you know, Hail Mary, right? I'm either going to blow this deer out, or it's going to stay in the creek. He doesn't cross the creek, and all these other does in the area don't cross the creek, and he comes out and kill. So I took that swing. I went in there, I hopped into the creek, I walked the creek bottom, all the way till parallel to that hay bale blind, got up into the hay bale blind. And at this point now, because of that first encounter with him, we now call this the poop blind. I get in the poop blind, which, you know, still has got all that nostalgia there. And I get set up in that blind, and as daylight fades, Tran, that buck who 2 years later was my number one buck, he comes out, feeds out in that plot. I pass him at like 60 yards and with a gun. And then right at last light, I see a doe pop out of the bedding area, and I'm just like crossing all my fingers and toes, like, please let that be the one. Please let that be the one. Please let that be the one. I've got like 3, 4, 5 minutes out, not very much time at all left. And then just there it is. That rack just comes popping out of the bedding area. And it was him. And he stepped out to the edge. He stood there like 80 yards and was able to get the shot and killed my biggest buck ever, biggest buck in Michigan. And, you know, was able to, I'm trying to think, so that would have been 2018. So my son, that would have been the first buck, if my memory serves me right, yeah, that would be the first buck that my son ever got to see me kill.
Cool. Yeah.
So he would have been one, or not even one. He was not even one, I think, at that point. And so he, you know, I got to bring him buck home. My son got to see it. My wife was the first person to have seen the buck, you know, when she saw him and sent me the video. So it was a whole like full circle family moment. Had the crazy thing with the poop blind, had all these close encounters and all this stress and excitement and me trying to figure out the pattern, figure out what he was doing. And then, like, you know, the luck of being out there scouting the day he showed up and getting eyes on him, and then taking the swing with that kind of aggressive move to get in there on him, and have it all actually come together was, you know, a lot of luck and a few good decisions. So
how old was he?
One.
How old was he?
Pretty sure he's 5.5.
Okay.
Because that, you know, the shed that I found from him and the one picture I have of him of that year would be like what I'd call like a typical 3-year-old for this area.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting. And what did he score?
165. So he actually didn't score as big. He looked bigger than that. I mean, 165 is a giant.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong. But I remember seeing him being like, that might be a 180.
Right.
And it's because actually, interestingly, he's got one side that is like a 175 to 180 type buck side.
Yeah.
And then his other side is like just like a couple inches shorter on everything.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Like deduct, you know, like 7 inches or something off the other side, and that's what he matched up. So the side I saw was his like booner side.
Yeah.
And but I mean, he was just a really, really cool buck. Just
scoring is great. I like scoring because it helps standardize, right? But I feel like it kind of, it's like deceptive a little bit, because you're like, oh, I shot a 130-inch buck. I just shot one in Kentucky, and a lot of the reason was one side, it was a 3-point, like 3 on a side. They're huge tines on one side, but it's that you lose a lot of points that way. And it's like, well, I actually probably would have rather shot this interesting buck as opposed to maybe one that's more typical and more symmetrical and would score higher. So it's interesting.
Yeah,
how that goes.
I think scoring, I mean, it gives you it, like you said, it can be useful, and it gives us like a common language, a numerical language to like talk about stuff and be like, oh, what's this kind of deer?
Yeah.
Which is great. But I think people put way too much weight on it. And I kind of had that aha moment after that buck, because I killed this buck, giant deer, and then we put the tape on it. And I remember we read out 165, and I remember being disappointed. I remember like feeling this thing in my gut, like I felt bad. And then I realized, like, how stupid is that?
Right.
Like, that didn't change the deer at all. Like, what a silly, stupid thing to care about. Like, this buck's incredible. He's everything you could ever dream of a deer. I'm not going to let some stupid scoring system that someone said's important make me feel any worse about it. So pretty much ever since that day, I've kind of put the middle finger up to scoring, and I'll do it every once. I'll still do it sometimes. It's interesting, but I'm not too worried about impressing people with the score of a deer anymore.
No, I love that. I feel the same way. So, I mean, this story had everything. You had, family, and you had like you pooped in a blind while there was a booner in front of you, which is awesome. Yeah. Your wife found it, which, is cool in itself. And you got to bring your son and everything else. So like, and what I really liked about it is it kind of, it's what a lot of hunters go through every year. So you'll see this deer, and I'm living this right now. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to hunt in this spot. Well, he goes to another spot, and it's like, okay, I'll go there. And then there's that internal debate, like, well, do I stay? Do I go? Do I hunt? Do I not? And that, I feel like that's not talked about enough, but like half of deer hunting are those stupid internal debates where I'm like laying in bed thinking about it the night before, like, what do I do? And I'll a lot of times go to bed and be like, well, I think I'll just have to make the call in the morning, because I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. Yeah,
that's it right there. And it is like the best and the worst thing about deer hunting. It can be, it's so much fun. Like, I love that chess match. I love the strategy. Like, that's the thing that I love so much. But then it's also incredibly stressful if you get too worked up about it. So yeah, that was definitely one of those bucks that perplexed me for quite a while there. But it came together.
No, that's great. And so with all this in mind, and looking back on that hunt, and you do this a lot, and you do it really well in your podcast. But what'd you learn? Like, what was, like, if you had to pick one takeaway, and I'm sure there was tons, but like, what would you say was a takeaway from that hunt?
I think one of the big takeaways of that hunt was just that it really solidified something I've been getting more and more sure of as a hunter, which is like, you have to sacrifice something. You have to take a swing when you're trying to, not always, but oftentimes when you're trying to get one of these big mature bucks, you can't play it super conservative in every way. Like, we always want like the wind in our direction, and we want, this setup perfect. We want the access perfect. We want to make sure no deer know we're there, yada, yada, yada. And you don't want to spook the deer, and you don't want to blow up the bedding area. Like, there's all these things. And growing up studying this stuff, I kind of studied under the gospel of certain hunters that were like super conservative, super low pressure, super manage your timing. If you make one mistake, you're never going to see that buck again. That's like what I was raised under. But the more and more I learn, at least in the places that I hunt and the kind of hunting that I mostly do, if you want to kill one of these older deer in a place like Michigan, where they are just very, very heavily hunted, there's not very many of these mature bucks that make it. And if they do make it, they made it for a reason. They made it because they are more cautious, they are more conservative, they are tighter to cover, they're less active than all the other bucks, right? If you ever want to get a shot at those kind of bucks, and if you want to do it on a somewhat consistent basis, I think you have to, in many cases, be willing to make some of those aggressive moves to actually pull it off. So these days I'm more and more likely to take like a, swing for the fences kind of home run shot now, because I know like you got to take those shots to ever connect. If you never shoot for a home run, you're just going to hit a bunch of singles. Right. And, singles are great. I love putting doughs in the freezer. But every once in a while I'd love to hit one over the fences, and you gotta take that kind of shot to get that kind of buck. So that hunt, I think, was one where maybe 5 years previous, I would have been too worried about that wind. And I would have said, man, it's not going to work. There's no way I can pull it off. But I knew like, hey, if I don't swing for it, I'll never get this chance again. So I have to risk it. And a similar thing happened opening day this year, where I had a setup where I really wanted to hunt this spot because I had some trail camera data and some previous history that told me like there's this zone that I really thought there were some bucks still moving through for opening day. And my number one buck was in this swamp. I was pretty sure he was bedding in the swamp. And I get there to that hunt that day, and the wind was just a little bit too north for that spot to work as well as it could. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, my number one spot isn't going to work. There's another spot I could go like 70, 80 yards, not that far down, but another spot I could go down where instead of hunting this little bean field, I'd be hunting this tiny food plot I have just north of it, adjacent to a different bedding area. And I knew there were two other bucks that I was interested in getting a shot at in this area that seemed to be bedding to the north more often. So my number one buck was bedding to the south more often. These other two bucks seemed to sometimes be to the north. And I knew with this wind direction, man, it's not going to work to the south at all. But I could do one of two things in this case. Like I know my number one location is not going to work. So I could either be super conservative and drop back to the front of the farm and like, just watch from afar, or just have like a nice night in the woods, but I knew I wasn't going to kill a buck up there. Or, and in my mind, I'm thinking, man, or you can do something to still take advantage of opening night. And I view opening night anywhere as like one of those really special opportunities where there's just year in and year out. If you hunt a place where these bucks have not been super pressured yet, you have a special opportunity that first day or two. And I knew that, and I really wanted to take advantage of that special opportunity. So my other option was I could go to this other spot and hunt that north bedding area where I knew there's two other great bucks. But to do that, I'd have to give up the swamp. I mean, I'd have to blow the hell out of that swamp and basically give up my number one buck. I knew like there's going to be deer down there. All of them might be down there. I don't know, but I am going to sacrifice this whole bedding area to take a home run for the north bedding area. And I never would have done that 10 years ago.
Interesting.
But in this case, I said, you know what? I believe that I can take this home run shot, and I think I've got a darn good shot with this home run. And either it works out, or I completely devastate one of the other main bedding areas. But I believe that if I give it some time, give it 2-3 weeks, like I believe I can, this area will recover and I'll be able to make something happen later down the road. So I took my shot, swung for the fences, and killed an awesome buck on opening night.
There you go. Right. And like you said, you would not have done that a handful of years ago.
No.
Interesting.
And that swamp that I devastated, and my number one buck that was down there, he's still around. He's still shown up in daylight a few times too. So I think, everything's situation dependent, everything's location dependent, but like where these deer are, this is like a little piece of property. It's not like I've got 1,000 acres that's completely controlled. There's like 47 acres of huntable land surrounded by other properties that other people hunt. And, this stuff, you're still able to recover from it. 10 years ago, I thought like if a buck smells me one time, he's going to move 20 miles away. And that's not happening. These deer live where they live for a reason. As long as they're not being consistently bumped out of a place, consistently bothered, consistently smelling people, they want to live in their bedroom. They want to hang out in these spots where they've been historically safe. So if you take a couple home run swings, it's not the end of the world.
Wonderful. No, that's great. That's great advice. And I love it. And to see that it already worked for you this year is pretty cool. I had to work on the buck on Frank. So, Hey, we're up on time. So Mark, thank you once again for giving up time, especially during the season to just put up with some of my questions.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's fun.
I'm sure that people listening know how to find you, but just in case someone like is living under a rock, has never heard of any of this, how can they find you? How can they see your, excuse me, your latest deer hunting YouTube series? How can they find all this stuff?
Yeah, so you can search for Wired to Hunt on all the social platforms. I'm most active on Instagram, so that'd be the best place to like connect with me personally. That's where I share my personal updates and stuff like that, and everything going on. And then, Wired to Hunt is the name of the podcast. You can find that anywhere podcasts are published. You can find the TV shows that I host. Best place to find those is on the Meat Eater YouTube channel. Like I mentioned, Deer Country is that new one that's out now. So check that out. And then if you go to themeateater.com/wired, that's where you will find all of our written content that I produce, that my colleague Tony Peterson writes, and we've got a whole slate of other freelance writers that contribute there too. So it's a ton of great deer hunting know-how, tactics, strategies, and stuff there. So, man, between the podcast, the videos, the written stuff, we'll keep you busy.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And yeah, like I said, thank you again. And everybody go check it out. Appreciate it again, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.